The World Bank's report Poverty and Shared Prosperity 2018, piecing together the poverty puzzle, pointed out that nearly half of the world's population, around 3.4 billion people, still struggle to meet basic living needs. They live on less than $5.50 a day. About 1 billion people have less than 99 cents a day. In 1992, the United Nations adopted Resolution 47 by 196, designating October 17th as the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Many countries have implemented their own poverty alleviation policies. However, the question arises as to why the number of poor people remains high. Is it because poor people are lazy, unintelligent, or have a poverty mindset? Today, let's discuss why the majority of people find it challenging to escape the sense of poverty. I once came across a peculiar question on the internet. Should subsidies and welfare for poor people be cancelled to motivate them to strive for improvement? Somewhere along the line, there seems to be a belief that poverty is a result of laziness and lack of effort. Various statements, resembling a mix of motivational quotes and tough love, have quietly gained popularity on the internet. Many people consider them as truths, asserting that poverty and laziness are inseparable siblings. This brings us to the first question of today's video. Is poverty really caused by laziness? If this is your first time tuning into our channel, the primary focus here is to provide critical perspectives on historical or societal controversial events, offering insightful descriptions and commentary. If you're interested, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on the notification bell. Let's get started. To answer the question of whether poverty is really caused by laziness, Barbara Ehrenreich, a columnist for Time magazine and assistant professor at the State University of New York, conducted an experiment in 1999. She concealed her true identity, stripped away all her privileges, and armed with $1,300, disguised herself as a poor person entering the world of the lower class. At the age of 58, Ehrenreich portrayed herself as a divorced ordinary woman. Over the next few months, she needed to sustain herself through low-wage physical labor. Initially, she rented a relatively inexpensive place in the western region of Florida, with a monthly rent of $500 and a $500 deposit. Thus, $1,000 was quickly spent. After renting the house, she spent $100 on groceries, leaving her with only $200. Ehrenreich's first job was as a waitress in a restaurant, with working hours from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. The hourly wage was $2.43, even lower than the government-mandated minimum wage at that time. If she worked regular hours, she could only earn $19.44 a day, while the rent was $16.60. This made it challenging to afford 3 meals a day. To make ends meet, Ehrenreich had to find a part-time job. As a result, her working hours extended from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. However, this allowed her to have a hot meal. Soon, due to severe sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion, she, like her colleagues, developed a smoking habit as a way to relieve stress. Through her job, Ehrenreich observed that her colleagues lived far from the restaurant. Some even had to wake up at 4 a.m. and spend 2 hours commuting. For low-income individuals, time and energy are the least valuable commodities. As long as they can save on rent, they don't mind spending more time commuting. Barbara's second job was in Maine, working as a janitor for a cleaning company. The hourly wage was much higher at $6.65 than her previous job as a waitress, but the local cost of living was relatively higher. Apartment rents were around $1,000, making it difficult for the company to cover the accommodation. In desperation, Barbara took on another job as a weekend caregiver at an elderly care center, earning $7 per hour. On one occasion, Barbara was assigned to clean the home of an employer who happened to be a teacher from a school where she had previously given a speech. While working, Barbara feared being recognized by the employer and constantly rehearsed in her mind how to respond if asked. However, it turned out that the employer didn't even look at her directly or care about her appearance. They were more concerned about her work efficiency. If restaurant servers experience physical fatigue, janitors face oppression in terms of dignity. Employers don't show pity for the sweat on their brows. Cleaning company bosses find ways to make their lives difficult. Agreed half-hour lunch breaks are often compressed to 15 minutes. If janitors in work uniforms go to convenience stores to buy something, even the cashiers look down on them. The worst part is falling sick. For janitors, falling ill disrupts everything. With their meager wages, they can't afford health insurance. Barbara's colleague from the cleaning company accumulated $8,000 in debt due to a herniated disc. After leaving the cleaning company, Barbara moved to Minnesota and found her third job as a sales clerk at Walmart, a large chain supermarket and the world's largest retailer. She thought that such a massive platform and work environment would be different from her previous experiences. However, reality delivered a harsh reality check. The larger the platform, the more meticulous the division of labor. While working at Walmart, Barbara's job was simple, neatly arranging product codes without needing to engage her brain. She merely repeated the same action for hours on end. Engaging in such long, mechanical work transformed her entirely. Her gaze became vacant, legs swollen, and her mind blank. Before the experiment, Barbara naively believed that if she were talented and worked hard enough, she could climb out of the lower class and live a decent life. However, the reality was far from it. Instead of breaking free from the world of dependence, she almost pushed herself to the brink of collapse. At first, she questioned why those in the lower class didn't find ways to enhance their social competitiveness. Through this experiment, she witnessed a large group of people facing ultra-low wages and enormous living costs. These individuals had to take on additional part-time jobs after work just to barely get by. After returning home from their suburban jobs, it was already late at night. Exhausted bodies couldn't support a learning plan, and people facing uncertainty about tomorrow's livelihood had no time to think about improvement. Over time, a person's spirit and determination are worn down. We often say that the quickest way to ruin a person is to keep them idle. Similarly, there's a concealed method to ruin someone. Keep them so busy that they have no time to grow. As the writer Gladwell has said, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. In Outliers, the story of success, the 10,000-hour rule is proposed, suggesting that the exceptional talents perceived by people are not due to extraordinary innate abilities, but rather the result of continuous effort. The 10,000 hours of practice are considered a necessary condition for anyone to transform from ordinary to a world-class master. However, when applied to the constantly busy lives of those struggling for a livelihood, particularly the poor, the 10,000-hour rule appears more like a 10,000-hour death law. Despite their diligent and tireless efforts, they seem to become increasingly impoverished, trapped in a cycle of struggle. The Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2019 was awarded to 3 scholars from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Kremer, to recognize their outstanding contributions in combating poverty. The first 2 scholars, Banerjee and Duflo, who are a married couple, spent years delving into 18 countries and regions concentrated with impoverished populations on 5 continents. They explored the true roots of poverty, co-authoring the book Poor Economics in 2011. The book introduces a crucial concept called the poverty trap, representing the role of capital in influencing people's productivity and the severity of poverty. Here, capital includes the money earned, the skills acquired, and the assistance received. In the coordinate system depicted in the book, the x-axis represents today's wealth, and the y-axis represents tomorrow's wealth. Assuming today's wealth is equal to tomorrow's wealth, your wealth value remains unchanged, forming a diagonal line. However, in reality, the situation often follows an S-shaped curve. Wealthier individuals possess more capital, enabling them to expand productivity, earn more money, and eventually reach a Q-equilibrium point. Meanwhile, poor individuals, having barely enough for basic necessities, lack the spare resources to engage in productive labor. Tomorrow becomes even more impoverished than today. The poverty trap results in the gradual impoverishment of those in the lighter shaded area, while those in the darker shaded area become wealthier. After numerous random field experiments, Banerjee and Duflo concluded that the cause of the poverty trap lies in the poor's ineffective utilization of resources and retained returns. Large amounts of capital that should have been used for future development are wasted. In simpler terms, the poor are more adept at squandering money. An example in the book illustrates this, where Banerjee and Duflo visited a poverty-stricken village in Morocco and found malnutrition among many children. The villagers had no money to buy food, yet nearly every household had a television. While the television couldn't change their economic situation, having proper nutrition could enhance their productivity. When asked about this, the villagers responded that the television was more important than food. Similar situations can be observed in our lives, where individuals, despite financial struggles, are willing to spend months or even years of income on an iPhone, an LV bag, or an extravagant wedding, only to be burdened by various loans and find it increasingly challenging to break free. It seems that the poor have a greater desire for luxury items than the wealthy. This leads to the second question in today's video. Are the poor poor because of a lack of self-control? Before answering this question, let's take a look at 2 famous psychological experiments. The first experiment took place in 1966 at a kindergarten in Stanford University. A group of children aged 4 to 6 faced a challenge: how to resist eating the marshmallow placed on the table in front of them. This experiment, known as the marshmallow experiment, was conducted by the renowned American psychologist Walter Mischel. The rules were as follows. The researchers placed a marshmallow in front of the children and told them that if they could resist eating it for 15 minutes, they would receive a second marshmallow. The researchers then left the room, leaving the children alone to observe their behavior. The results showed that only about 1/3 of the children successfully resisted and earned the second marshmallow. However, the experiment didn't end there. Michel's team conducted follow-up studies on these children and found that those who demonstrated better self-control as children generally exhibited better life outcomes as they grew older. This included better SAT scores, healthier BMI indicators, and higher levels of perseverance. The ability to resist the temptation of a marshmallow for 15 minutes seemed to correlate with becoming a winner in life. The simplicity of the experiment and the remarkable results captured public attention, and Michel's research has been widely cited in countless publications. In his paper, Michel introduced the concept of delayed gratification, suggesting that individuals with self-control are better able to resist immediate temptations, making them more likely to succeed. However, in 2018, Columbia University psychology professor Tyler Watts, along with professors Greg Duncan from the University of California, published a paper in the journal Psychological Science that overturned the conclusions of the marshmallow experiment, causing a seismic shift in the field of psychology. Watts and his colleagues optimized the experiment with a larger sample size, involving over 900 children from diverse racial backgrounds, varying parental education levels, and different family income levels. Through tracking these children for more than 10 years, Watts discovered that not only could they not replicate Michel's previous findings, but they also made a completely new discovery. The ability of children to achieve success, it turns out, is not determined by their self-control or delayed gratification skills, but rather by the socio-economic status of their families. New experimental data indicated that children who could resist the temptation of the marshmallow generally came from more affluent families. In affluent households, children had the luxury of being able to eat marshmallows whenever they wanted, and waiting wasn't a big deal. On the other hand, children born into less fortunate families had fewer opportunities to enjoy marshmallows, resulting in lower resistance to temptation. Even if their parents had promised to buy them more and better food, these promises were often broken due to economic limitations. Consequently, children from less privileged backgrounds struggled to build confidence in their future. The second experiment took place during World War II in 1944, a time of widespread conflict and displacement, where the once prosperous European continent faced severe food shortages. Nearly the entire European population was experiencing hunger, leading to daily cases of starvation-induced deaths. To address the crisis of famine in Europe, various efforts were undertaken by countries such as the Netherlands, Greece, Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, and even the United States military. Against this backdrop, Dr. Selkes from the University of Minnesota conducted a groundbreaking experiment on human starvation to provide effective data for relief efforts. This is known as the famous Minnesota Starvation Experiment. The experiment involved 36 physically and mentally healthy male volunteers who lived together in a communal dormitory during the study. The experiment consisted of 3 phases: a 3-month control period, a 6-month starvation period, and a 3-month recovery period. During the initial 3-month control period, volunteers were allowed to consume 3,200 calories per day, with variations based on individual body conditions. During this period, participants were required to engage in a weekly 22-mile walk, while their daily activities were otherwise unrestricted. On February 12, 1945, the experiment officially entered the 24-week starvation phase. During this stage, volunteers were only allowed to intake 1,600 calories per day, and their level of physical activity remained unchanged. At the end of the starvation phase, the average body weight of the 36 volunteers had decreased by approximately 25%. Some volunteers, who were initially lean, experienced significant reduction in buttock fat, leading to pain while sitting, and even cases of edema. Some volunteers became physically weak to the point of having difficulty speaking. The physical toll was not the most painful aspect. The majority of participants reported that the most unbearable aspect was the psychological torment. Many volunteers in the experiment began to develop an obsessive focus on food. Some became fixated on reading recipes and restaurant menus, spending hours studying newspaper prices for fruits and vegetables. While watching movies, only scenes related to food would capture their interest. At the dining table, they would handle food as if they were infants, gently pinching or staring at the food in front of them as if it were gold. This excessive fixation on food further intensified the suffering caused by hunger. As time passed, an increasing number of volunteers had to terminate the experiment due to psychological distress, with some even requiring hospitalization. After enduring the most terrifying phase of starvation, the emotions of the volunteers gradually stabilized during the 3-month recovery period. However, the semi-starved state continued to pose long-term challenges. Volunteers struggled to distinguish between hunger and normal appetite, with almost all of them engaging in binge eating. Some individuals consumed 6,000 calories per day, but still felt unsatisfied. Even 8 months after the experiment concluded, some volunteers had not fully restored normal eating habits. Through these 2 psychological experiments, some clues have likely been discerned. In 2013, Harvard University professor Sendil Muller Inafon and Princeton University psychology professor Eldar Shafir co-authored the book Scarcity, and introduced the concept of the scarcity mindset. The book meticulously analyzes how the scarcity mindset influences people's thinking and decision-making, leading them to pursue immediate benefits. In the hunger experiment, due to the scarcity of food, eating became the most crucial thing in the subject's minds, rendering other aspects of life dull. It's like viewing the world through a pipe, where everything outside the pipe is invisible. The scarcity mindset regarding a particular resource can also create a psychological tunnel vision, causing individuals to excessively chase after that resource and lose overall and long-term judgment. Self-control has always been a precious and essential attribute. However, for those living in extreme poverty, constantly mobilizing their self-control is a necessity. Taking a sip of clean water or having a full meal becomes a luxury. Once a person's willpower is depleted, they tend to postpone easy tasks to today and leave challenging tasks for tomorrow. Children in impoverished families, when faced with a cotton candy, may not even be able to ensure the possession of the first piece, making the second piece inconsequential to them. So, refrain from saying things like poor people are inherently lacking in self-control or have short-sightedness. The scarcity mindset keeps them busy with immediate hardships, leaving them powerless to contemplate the future, let alone plan for it. This is why George Orwell said, "The essence of poverty is to eliminate a person's future." Closely linked to the scarcity mindset is another concept, bandwidth. In their book, Banerjee and Duflo also mentioned an example related to this concept. In Zambia, large numbers of children die from dysentery every year due to drinking contaminated water. However, the cost of purifying water is exceptionally low, thanks to the efforts of international population service organizations. The price of water disinfectant has been reduced to 800 kwacha, equivalent to 18 cents, or the cost of one meal. Yet, only 10% of households use the disinfectant. They prefer to risk infection rather than utilize the existing affordable resource. The book Scarcity also points out that today, with antiretroviral drugs to control HIV, millions of people still die each year because they cannot adhere to the medication regimen. Non-adherence to medication is even more severe for tuberculosis patients. While individuals in every income bracket may disregard medical advice and forget to take medication, the frequency of non-adherence is highest among the poor. Whether it's AIDS, diabetes, tuberculosis, or other diseases, the same pattern repeats. The poor don't take medication not because the drugs are expensive, but simply because they forget. Similarly, the poor in Zambia don't use water disinfectant not because it's costly, but because they can't afford it. This leads to the third question in today's video. Are poor people poor because they are stupid and foolish, harboring grand delusions? In Scarcity Art, the two authors, Muller-Nathan and Shafir, liken the human brain to a computer. Similar to how computers have memory limitations, individuals also have a limit to the things they can focus on, referred to as bandwidth. Because skills are limited, the brain allocates more memory to deal with higher priority issues, at the expense of squeezing out resources for other programs. For instance, while driving, one could easily answer a simple question like what is 1 + 1, but might find it challenging to calculate something more complex, like what is 17 multiplied by 24, due to the bandwidth consumption of the latter. Likewise, the thoughts of poor individuals are excessively occupied by the issue of poverty, making them appear forgetful and prone to making mistakes in other matters. In 2013, a group of American psychologists conducted an experiment in India titled "Poverty Impedes Cognitive Function" and published the results in a scientific journal. The study involved 464 sugar cane farmers in India. These farmers received 60% of their annual income in one lump sum after the harvest season, meaning they experienced relative affluence for a period and relative poverty for another. The psychologists conducted cognitive tests before and after the harvest season. Surprisingly, the farmers exhibited lower IQ scores before the harvest compared to after, indicating that poverty had a detrimental impact on their cognitive abilities. If it weren't for the constant torment of poverty, poor individuals might not necessarily be less intelligent than their wealthier counterparts. In essence, the difference between poor and rich individuals is much smaller than one might imagine. The most significant distinction might be that poor individuals are born into poverty. Up to this point, we have been discussing absolute poverty, the struggle for basic needs. However, there are likely many people currently watching this video, either with leisure on their smartphones or with their computers taken away, who still feel poor. If you share this feeling, feel free to comment on what makes it challenging for 90% of people in modern society to escape relative psychological poverty. It's worth noting that the discussion so far has mainly focused on absolute poverty, affecting those striving for basic necessities. However, even in modern society, where most people have access to technology, there's a prevalent sense of relative poverty. The majority of viewers, especially those from the mainstream and the middle generation of the 80s and 90s, might have parents from the 60s or 70s. Have you noticed a phenomenon? Our parents' generation experienced a difficult childhood, yet few of them felt psychological pain due to poverty. For instance, my father, growing up as the second child in a family of 6, had a challenging childhood. At that time, there were no mobile phones, and even black and white televisions were not widespread. The most valuable electronic device in their home was a radio. The most anticipated moments were during the new year when they could have a meat meal and wear new clothes. Their toys were all homemade. Despite this seemingly dull childhood from our perspective, my father recalls it as an extraordinarily joyful time. They didn't perceive their family as poor because during that era, everyone was in a similar financial situation. There was no basis for comparison, and hence there was no suffering. In 1964, the German-American philosopher and sociologist Herbert Marcuse published the book One-Dimensional Man, sharply criticizing contemporary capitalism and Soviet communism as two social systems that subjected the masses to a new form of repression. In the book, he introduced the concept of the one-dimensional man, suggesting that advanced industrial societies, by utilizing technology to create and satisfy people's material needs, had created an environment for the masses that, while comfortable, lacked freedom. Simultaneously, individuality and cognition were constrained with a loss of critical thinking, as material standards became the measure of all things. Everyone became a one-dimensional man. A crucial concept in the book is false needs, referring to how advanced industrial societies use media, advertising, and other means to induce and brainwash the public into developing desires that are neither genuine nor necessary. To illustrate, consider advertisements for Swiss watches like Audemars Piguet, which claims you can easily own time but can't easily own Audemars Piguet. Similarly, Rolex's slogan asserts, "Rolex doesn't change the world, people wearing Rolex change the world." Chanel tagline states, "No one can enjoy our dreams." These slogans subtly convey a value system, suggesting that owning these commodities can elevate one to a superior status. However, in reality, the essence of a watch is to tell time, and the essence of a bag is to carry things. There is no fundamental difference between a watch that costs hundreds of thousands and one that costs a few $100s, or between an expensive bag and an inexpensive one. Modern society has assigned them excessive meanings. Marcuse argued that advanced industrial society had transformed into a new type of authoritarianism, reminiscent of totalitarian regimes like the Nazis and fascists. In this society, individuals lack personal space and freedom, and material wealth becomes the singular value orientation. Capitalists provide a few pieces of bread, sprinkle some chicken soup, and make everyone believe that wearing a Rolex or carrying Chanel can break down class barriers. In reality, people fall into the trap of consumerism, becoming slaves to materialism. Not only do we become material slaves, but the definition of words like dreams and success is also taken away from us. False needs can maintain the surface prosperity and progress of society, but fail to bring inner satisfaction and happiness. This is why the majority of people find it challenging to escape the feeling of poverty. Although efforts might be made to gradually reduce the absolute poverty population, psychological relative poverty remains insurmountable. The endless nature of human desires, akin to a carrot dangling in front of a donkey, perpetually keeps hope alive while remaining forever unattainable. This is why, as material life becomes more abundant, people's stress increases. Unfortunately, Marcuse did not provide a feasible solution to this problem. Perhaps the issue itself isn't solvable unless there is a fundamental change in the social structure. However, there is no need for excessive pessimism. The cruel reality forces us to bend down for the basic necessities, but while striving to earn money, we should not let money devour all our beliefs, because the happiest thing in the world is to strive for love and ideals, not just for money. Hopefully, everyone can become someone poor but not destitute. That's all for today. If you want to continue supporting this channel, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell to ensure you don't miss any episodes. Lastly, if being radical is the new norm and objectivity is considered heretical, perhaps we should be radically objective. Until next time, stay curious and stay unconventional.